Today I'm going to talk about my experience in Brownsville, Brooklyn in the 2010s. This is a residential neighborhood located in eastern Brooklyn. That's from the Wikipedia page. So I've talked about in my other videos a lot of the trends that were going on in Brooklyn in the 2010s. We have the hipster, we have gentrification. I talk about a lot of the changes that happen in neighborhoods like Williamsburg and Bushwick. But I also want to talk about Brooklyn as a whole from what I saw in the 2010s. And the amazing thing is that things like gentrification, actually, it was such a huge trend, a phenomenon in Brooklyn in the 2010s. But really, a lot of parts of Brooklyn, maybe even the majority, were not affected by gentrification. Well, I don't want to say maybe the majority was affected, but there were plenty of places that weren't. Brooklyn is not a big place either. So we're talking about a lot of Brooklyn was not affected by this trend, was not affected by the hipster phenomenon, the spillover from Manhattan, with people from Manhattan choosing to live in Brooklyn, with changes in nightlife and things like the Barclays Center, which was the big arena that was built in Brooklyn in the 2010s that helped usher in a lot of other changes. Really, a lot of parts of Brooklyn were just not affected by these huge changes, which is really amazing because it's not a big place. This is especially the case in what we call southern Brooklyn. When you're getting down to places like Gerritsen Beach or Bath Beach, these places were pretty much unaffected completely by these phenomenons. And these neighborhoods retained a lot of their the way they had been. In terms of demographics, in terms of what you saw, businesses you saw on the streets. You didn't have a huge arena like the Barclays Center going up anywhere near these type of places. So Brownsville was another neighborhood of Brooklyn that was one of these places. So where is it? So I want to talk about it because there's a lot to say, that especially to contrast it with what I saw going on in other parts of Brooklyn. So where is Brownsville? It's in the more eastern part of Brooklyn, closer to Queens. It's bordered by, and this is from Wikipedia, bordered by Crown Heights to the northwest, Bedford-Stuyvesant and Cypress Hill to the north, East New York to the east, Canarsie to the south, and East Flatbush to the west. So kind of like more eastern, kind of in the middle, you could say kind of in the south. So that's where it is located. And from what I understand, it had been a primarily Jewish neighborhood in the middle of the 20th century. Not really sure who lived there or what it was like before. But from the very quick check of the Wikipedia page, you can check some more yourself. It underwent a lot of changes in the later part of the 20th century. And from what I see, if you do a Google search of Brownsville right now in 2020, it doesn't really show a lot of positive results. I think I did it myself, and here is what you see. There's some under interesting finds. There's some things about the effects of policing in Brownsville, master planners of New York, an inside look at Brownsville, Brooklyn. And then you start to get to other articles and information from Time Magazine. Brownsville, inside one of Brooklyn's most dangerous neighborhoods. This is from 2012. Next, after that, from July 11th, 2019, this is the deadliest neighborhood in New York City. From 2010, Reuters, Brownsville, the hood that New York left behind. And let's see more results. I mean, you're getting the idea here. There's some information about renting, building healthy communities. From the New York State Health Foundation, Brownsville is a neighborhood in Brooklyn that can be described as both urban and rural. Urban in its density, but rural in its disconnectedness from, I guess, the rest of New York City. I definitely wouldn't describe it as rural. I mean, it's pretty much like as inner city as you can get. So yeah, it's had a reputation, and from what you hear people in Brooklyn say when talking about different places, Brownsville definitely has a reputation as being generally poorer, more violent than a lot of places in New York City, especially and Brooklyn in particular. So how did I get there? I never lived there, but I worked there actually. I worked there a lot as a contractor in 2017, 2018, and part of 2019. So I was there a lot during the daytime throughout those years, and really met a lot of people there. Worked in a lot of places. I probably worked all over Brownsville. I really saw the whole place. And well, one thing that you notice in particular that was different from places like Williamsburg, Greenpoint, and Bushwick was that you definitely don't see a lot of restaurants when you go into Brownsville. You see churches, bodegas, schools, and then there's like a commercial part of it, which was Pitkin Avenue, a part of Pitkin Avenue that was in Brownsville, where you have like a lot of stores and maybe takeout places like Chinese or Jamaican. I don't remember exactly, but you don't see like in Williamsburg where people are at like sidewalk cafes, and there's a lot of like new restaurants and sit down restaurants. Like in general, you don't see that. Not a lot of like the commercial areas, yeah, like supermarkets, things like that. Definitely a lot of bodegas, which you have all over Brooklyn. But you don't see for sure a lot of what you see on the street in places like Williamsburg. And it's what else can I say about that? Yeah, that's a very striking thing. Like you definitely just you'll see all over those parts of Brooklyn, just people just hanging out at cafes, maybe having some drinks and things like that. Yeah, you don't see like independent like boutiques or things like that. And so definitely the look is different. And for sure, there's a main road in Brownsville called Mother Gaston, and all over that is a lot of the towers that are part of the New York City Housing Authority, which is like colloquially called the projects. So you drive down Mother Gaston, and that's what you see. Like I believe is on both sides, like different housing projects. NYCHA, I believe it was like Van Dyke, Armstrong. So that's there's a lot of New York City public housing there, and throughout the years, especially when I was growing up, these had a reputation for crime and poverty as well. Now, I worked in a lot of them, and while I would say it's definitely uh, people are not rich in there, but I wouldn't say that that told the whole story. It's it I mean, for sure there's people there, like I said, they were not wealthy by any means, but I wouldn't say all of them were necessarily poor or desperately poor, for sure. Some people really did real nice work at in these places, um, but generally, the buildings themselves, or what I would say were not in good shape. Well, it's hard to say. I mean, what standard are you going by? Like, the buildings were definitely old, and when you walked into the lobby, they didn't look good. Like, they looked grimy. They often looked dirty. Like, there's not really decorations. Like, you walk through these, like, big steel doors and like into elevator, and like a lot of times like the elevator just was like kind of dirty looking. I mean, like it just looked old. Like I wouldn't say necessarily like they're crumbling, they're falling apart, but they're old buildings. Now, sometimes the apartments would be very nice inside because of what people had done to them and taken care of them, and there was a lot of upkeep, and often I found that, but like it's just more in like the exterior, like the hallways, the lobbies, like they're just kind of grim and grimy looking, like very, it's public housing. It's just very basic, like these ugly stones, and yeah, when you look out, like the windows would, I kind of remember would be like kind of foggy a lot of times. Now there was a lot going on about that the heat wouldn't be working in a lot of these places. That was something that was in the news, which I had heard was true in some of them, some of the public housing, but a lot of times when I was working there in the winter, I mean, they would be just piping hot, like just because I think the heating systems were old, so they didn't have thermostats where it could be controlled. But wow, they would just be like really hot, and like those pipes that brought up the heat, like you did not want to touch them. I did accidentally a couple times, and I mean, like they were just really hot. So that was my experience there. I worked a lot, obviously working in Brownsville a lot. I worked a lot in those public housing. Um, so, like I said, you see all this news like murder capital and this and that. Um, Now that may be true. I'm just gonna say from my experience, I in general did not feel unsafe working there as I did in the daytime. I never witnessed any violent crime in front of me in Brownsville. Um, I was never robbed. I was never harassed. Uh, I like didn't see like any domestic disputes or anything like that. Now I'm a 6 foot tall man, so it's possible that has something to do with it, or not. I'm in workman's clothes, so I'm not walking around like like I have something to rob. You generally wouldn't think I'd be a target for that. I'm just saying from my experience, I didn't witness anything. I was never, robbed, a victim of crime over there. In in general, it's like I said, there's there's the statistics which back it up about murders and other kinds of crime, and I don't doubt that. But in my experience, at least in the daytime, it was not something that I ever witnessed. Yeah, sometimes I'd go into a bodega or something, and things would seem a little sketchy. There was one time I think by the train station, by the 3 train which goes over there. I was going into a place, and it just kind of looked like when I went in, like some kind of flop house. And I mean, there were just people, like maybe drug addicts or something, just sitting around on the steps. And like, a guy approached me, and he definitely wasn't a real doorman or anything, and kind of like said, like, asking me a bunch of questions, asking why I was there and what I was doing. And I told him I was a contractor. And he seemed a little suspicious or something like that about letting me in. There was something up with that place. um but yeah, I mean, there were other times, like plenty of other times in the course of my work, which I did feel unsafe. I witnessed crimes, violence, domestic disputes, and for whatever reason, it never happened there to me. In general, did not feel unsafe. Going to the commercial area in Pitkin, nice place to go do some shopping. There's clothing stores there, things like that. Um, it's not a bad commercial district compared to other parts of Brooklyn. Kind of similar to other parts of Brooklyn, or like Jamaica Avenue in Queens. Um, but yeah, there's a huge contrast to what you could say were the gentrified or gentrifying neighborhoods of Brooklyn. Um, Generally, the racial makeup, I would say, in Brownsville, from my experience, was mostly black. I don't know. It probably was some definitely Caribbean people there. A lot of out of the uh, if you're going down the racial breakdown, like a lot of the black people were surely Caribbean, probably African American too. I don't think I met too many Africans in from Africa there, but it was generally black. Maybe some Hispanics as well, but I didn't see too many. Didn't see like a lot of their stores or other evidence of a Hispanic neighborhood. Um, not, I did not see white people in general, either working there or living there. It definitely seemed a place where that they were not as part of the population, even though I heard that they had been in the 20th century. So that was the demographic makeup. You definitely throughout the 2010s, or at least the time I was there, 2017, 2018, 2019, did not see any evidence of the changes going on there. Rapid housing development, people from other like creative types moving in, artists. Did not see that. Maybe there were some immigrants, but in general, it wasn't like a destination for like middle class kids moving to New York City, at least at that time. I had heard, I believe in 2019, somebody I was working for there told me about that there were plans for new development in Brownsville, that people were buying up property, or real estate people were buying up property for some possible future plans for the area. Some of that, I believe, was already happening in East New York, which was a neighborhood nearby. Because you did have some of the neighborhoods that bordered Brownsville were had experienced already a lot of gentrification, like Bedford-Stuyvesant, all the way down to Atlantic Avenue, which was kind of like the border. You had a lot of people moving in, and some changes happening. But in general, there was no evidence of this in Brownsville the time I was there, or at least things that I saw myself. Um, it had probably a similar demographic since the end of the 20th century. And like I said, generally it just looked. It looked a little. It was an industrial part too that definitely had that very like urban industrial look. Um, there were some. It wasn't all housing projects too or NYCHA. Like there were definitely some areas that had kind of like middle class housing, 1 to 2 story houses, like houses that would be connected to each other, and people there that was didn't seem uh, they were living in poverty, like kind of like middle class homeowners possibly. So that's also something maybe a lot of people wouldn't know. Like I said, there's all this news that you tend to see about it focuses on the poverty and violence. So that's what I have to say about Brownsville for now. It's a lot of contrast, especially in its look, in the development from other parts of Brooklyn. But when speaking about its reputation, I myself didn't find it in the daytime when I worked there to be a particularly unsafe or dangerous place to be for a few hours out of the day. Um, so that was my experience there. Like I said, I want to talk about all the different parts of Brooklyn that I experienced, that I went to in the 2010s. So Brownsville is one of them. If you have any comments or questions, leave it down below. And check out my other videos about Brooklyn in the 2010s as